Good morning, dear friends, and a good Chodesh. Wishing you all a wonderful month ahead. Today is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the first day we are beginning the month of Sivan, the month in which we celebrate the giving of the Torah to us, to the Jewish people. So I want to wish you all a wonderful month ahead and a wonderful summer ahead. And here we go. Let's do today's mitzvah. We are continuing the same mitzvahs yesterday, continuing to learn the laws of marriage, and specifically that not only is it a mitzvah to get married, but it must be done in marriage. There's no such thing as a relationship between a man and a woman, specifically an intimate physical relationship, outside of the framework of marriage called kiddushin. And one of the things that we are seeing emerging here is that the absolute insistence in halacha, in Torah, that a man and a woman cannot be married and cannot be physically intimate and in a relationship, in a real relationship, and of course engagement, but in a personal relationship where they're both living in the same home and being physically intimate with each other, that type of relationship cannot happen outside of a kiddushin with a ksuba. And in today's laws, the Rambam goes through the laws of the ksuba. And the ksuba is a marriage contract, and part of that contract are the obligations from the husband to his wife, and from the wife to the husband. They each have obligations to each other, what they need to bring to this relationship, to this marriage. Although primarily it's responsibilities from the man towards the woman. And what you see in these laws is how the framework of Kiddushin and Ksuba builds into Jewish law and avoids abuse, marriages where there's abuse and dysfunction. And it's unbelievable how, within the laws of the Ksuba, how everything is written out. And it just doesn't allow the husband to just drop the ball and be abusive within the marriage. So let's go through these ideas very, very briefly. So number one, the three biblical obligations from a husband to his wife, which are called the obligations of the ksuba, are number one, that the wife should have clothing, should have ample clothing that he has to provide for her. She has to have food, and he has to be there for her intimately, for her intimate needs, and be responsive to her in that way. But along with that, there's also a bunch of other obligations. He needs to make sure that she has a home. He has to make sure that she has money. She has to make sure that she's comfortable. She has to make sure that she gets buried when she dies. She has to make sure that if she's ever in trouble, he has to be the one to provide the money or the means to help her out. So, and the Rambam goes into the specifics. And what the Rambam does is, he creates a baseline. Let's say you're extremely poor. You're married, you're extremely poor. You're a man, and you really don't have the money to provide for your wife. Okay, so the Rambam says this is the baseline. You cannot do anything less than this for your wife. And the Rambam literally goes through clothing, this value of clothing. Or if you live outside of Israel, you have to see what is the minimum amount of clothing that an adult woman needs to have for different seasons, and you must provide that. Shoes, home, what's the minimum size home? Food, how many meals per day? What type of meals, etc. The Rambam says that this is talking about a very poor person, impoverished person. You must be giving minimum this. But then, beyond this, the sky's the limits, and it all is based on your wealth. The more wealth a man has, the more he must provide for his wife, and the higher quality. So for example, the Rambam says, let's say there's a husband, he's very wealthy, he has a lot of money, but he's not really giving his wife the ability to buy nicer clothing and nicer shoes or nicer food. What the Rambam says is that ultimately, the Jewish court would pressure him and would force him and say, this is not right, you have so much money, we know that you have a lot of money, and you are not providing for your wife. And this is all tied into the ksuba, which means that it's a legal contract, and it's all specified in Jewish law. It's like that, this element of the relationship between husband and wife is not something which is personal, which every single couple figures out on their own, but these basic ideas that a man must provide for his wife is literally laid out in Jewish law and is enforceable by the force of law, which is a very, very powerful concept. And one last little nugget from the Rambam today is that not only clothing, but the Rambam says that a man must make sure that his wife has the proper clothing for different occasions. If she wants to go visit a friend, if she wants to go to a wedding, it's not enough that she just has regular clothing. Even if you're very poor, again, the Rambam is beginning with the baseline, with the bare minimum. So you don't say, well, listen, I got you basic clothing. I can't afford to get you a nice dress for a wedding. No, She has to be able to have a dress to go out to a wedding. And she must have proper clothing to go to a house of mourners. And the Rambam says clearly, a husband is not allowed to abuse his wife and keep her locked up in the home. That's not what a wife is. And the Rambam says very clearly, a wife is not meant to sit at home as if she's in a prison. She must have the means, even on the baseline level, to leave her home, to go visit friends, to go join things. And it's just so interesting seeing in such detail how the Rambam goes through, and he says because Judaism has this value, that there's no such thing as a relationship outside of the halachic framework of ksuba and kiddushin, that it protects marriages and it creates an environment where there's no abuse and there's no dysfunction, and it is very, very clear what is the man's responsibility to his wife. And only in that way could they enter into an intimate relationship. Dear friends, that's today's Daily Mitzvah. Hope you enjoyed. I want to wish you all a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh. We'll see you soon for our next Daily Mitzvah.